Ladies and gentlemen, regarding the current situation with Iran and the Iranian regime therein, things are pretty much right this very moment unfolding at light speed right now. But I'll tell you what, as things currently seem, the Iranian regime is about to learn a very difficult lesson, courtesy of none other than President Trump. So today, we're going to break down every single component of this, admittedly, very complex situation, starting with, to kick this off, some statements from emissary Steve Witkoff from earlier this morning regarding the Trump administration's demands of the Iranian regime. Take a look at this.
I think the president he gave Jared and I direction before we went over there. There were red lines, zero enrichment. We have to have the material back. You know, they say that it's all about their civil program, and yet they've been enriching well beyond the number that you need for civil nuclear. It's up to 60%. They're probably a week away from having industrial grade bomb making material, and that's really dangerous. So they can't have that. This is something that they have to stick with until they prove to us that they can behave.
I know.
Okay, so let's kind of break down the way that this works. If you want to have a civilian, nuclear energy program, you need to enrich uranium up to around 3.6, 3.7%. Iran, we know for a very long time, has had the capacity and has also been actively enriching uranium. We know that they've already done it up to around 60%, perhaps even higher. The way this works, any uranium enriched beyond or above 20%, if you have enough of it, you can make a nuclear weapon. So the lower percent above 20, if you stockpile enough of it, you can technically, if you are so inclined, you can make an active nuclear weapon. The more enriched the uranium is, the less you need. And so this is why, if you look back to Barack Obama's JCPOA, the nuclear deal he made with Iran, this is back in 2015, Barack Obama imposed two rules in accordance with this deal. He said, you're not allowed to enrich uranium beyond 3.67, so you can have a nuclear power program, but not nuclear weapons. Additionally, you're not allowed to stockpile more than, I believe it was 300 kilograms. So it was a stockpile limit and it was an enrichment limit. Now, this deal was obviously terrible. It was effectively just a 15-year, $2.2 trillion bribe to the Iranians to not make a nuclear weapon, at which point, after the 15-year sunset clause kicked in, they could have done so if they wanted. This is why when Trump got back into the White House, when he got in the White House the first time in 2018, Trump ripped up this deal, said, this is a ridiculous deal. We're not going to pay the Iranians $2.2 trillion by lifting our sanctions, at the end of which they can make as much enriched uranium as they want. Trump said this is an incompetent deal. So that's why we kind of are in the situation we're in now. Now, Trump, he has two demands for the Iranian regime as things currently stand. No ballistic missiles and no uranium enrichment at all. 0%. With Obama, you got 3.67. Now it's 0. You have lost the privilege to enrich uranium. Now it's 0, plus no ballistic missiles. And they've been talking about this. They've been debating this. And the Iranian regime has refused to capitulate to President Trump's demands. The Iranian regime, they want to enrich uranium. They want to have an enriched uranium stockpile, and also they want to have their ballistic missiles. Which brings us to our next clip here. Take a listen.
I know that we have red lines here from the U.S. How about over with Iran?
The president asked me that this morning, and I don't want to use the word frustrated. It's almost because he understands he's got plenty of alternatives. But it's curious. He's curious as to why they haven't, I don't want to use the word capitulated, but why they haven't capitulated. why under this sort of pressure with the amount of sea power, naval power that we have over there, why they haven't come to us and said, we profess that we don't want a weapon, so here's what we're prepared to do. And yet it's hard to sort of get them to that place.
So this is Witkoff, Trump's envoy, special envoy to the Middle East, actually talking to President Trump's daughter-in-law, Laura Trump, saying, right now, Trump is confused. Trump is kind of dumbfounded. We have an insane amount of military pressure right now, huge military presence in the Middle East. We have a carrier battle group. A second carrier battle group is going to be there very soon. We've got over 1,000 Tomahawk missiles and submarines and destroyers and cruisers and military bases. The pressure is insane on Iran right now. Why have they not agreed to our terms? Trump is saying, what's going on here? Well, if you are a logical, good faith, sound of mind debater or negotiator, you need to keep in mind, not everybody shares your perspective. Sometimes you are attempting to negotiate with somebody, or in this case, a regime that is literally insane. You can't negotiate with an insane person, or in this case, an insane regime. And that might be the case. We have a report coming out of the Associated Press today saying the Iranians have now come to the conclusion that the only way that they can stop this cycle of war is to draw blood and to inflict significant harm on the U.S. and Israel, even if that comes at a very high price for themselves. So, per the Associated Press, the Iranian regime is willing to go a little bit kamikaze mode. They're willing to suffer a catastrophic amount of damage on themselves if it means inflicting a wound on Israel or the United States. They're willing to make this sort of lopsided trade. If they've got to shed a gallon of blood just to get one drop of blood out of us, maybe they're willing to do it. This is insane. These people are perhaps insane. Well, there's something to keep in mind here. I was actually reading a special report talking about this. Okay. When we're talking about the Iranian regime, we need to keep in mind what exactly is their mindset here. Well, the Iranian regime is effectively a radically Islamic theocracy at its core. That is their form of government, okay? Their regime is led by a bunch of radically Islamic theocratic zealots. They have, to say the least, very strong religious convictions. The regime that is running this government is a special sect of Islam called the Twelver Shia Islam. It's sort of a special sect of Islam. They have a very specific end times prophecy that may be influencing their behavior right now. Like I said, very strong religious convictions. In essence, what the leaders of the Iranian regime believe is in something called the hidden imam, a religious leader who will reappear at the end times, whenever the end times are, when all hope seems to be lost. And this hidden imam, this sort of prophetic religious leader, will pop up and deliver his followers a victory, effectively defeating the forces of evil, as it's described, and establishing a new divine rule following a sort of judgment day sort of scenario. This is what the leaders of Iran believe. Like I said, they're a part of this sect called the Twelver Shia Islam sect. And worth noting, in this case, of course, they believe that the forces of evil are the United States and Israel. This might be influencing their behavior. So if they believe that all of this, what's currently going on right now in the Middle East, is some sort of radical Islamic judgment day sort of prophecy, needless to say, they're probably not going to be acting rationally or negotiating in a way that we are going to understand or appreciate. They're not acting in good faith, or at least in a cohesive thought process here. But okay, moving on from that, I just want to try to understand what is their logic, because we said Trump is confused. He doesn't understand why they've not surrendered. Well, I think a lot of it comes back to their religious dogma. Really, I think that's why. And so this is why just last night we saw, take a look at this, an absolutely massive U.S. Air Force air bridge to support future strikes on Iran continued overnight, with dozens of airlifters moving additional air defense assets and munitions from the U.S. across the Atlantic. We're going to play the video here. Down across Europe and in the Middle East. This is ongoing, just massive relocation of military equipment and military hardware. This is what has gone on in the last couple hours. Relocating a huge amount of equipment. Now, to put all of this sort of military equipment relocation into perspective here, we're going to take a listen to what an individual, his name is James Farnell. He's a retired U.S. Navy captain. he made an appearance on Bannon's War Room talking about where really are we going here?
Your assessment of where we stand with this, as President Trump refers to a vast armada.
Well, Steve, I think right now we're seeing, as you said, all the chess pieces are getting into the region, into the EUCOM, European Command, and Central Command's area of responsibility. So from the Eastern Mediterranean down into the Gulf of Oman. Over on Friday night, was reported that the USS Gerald R. Ford and its carrier battle group had went through, transited through the Strait of Gibraltar and is now in the Mediterranean Sea. And the latest reporting from on air asset updates, we basically have over 350 combat aircraft that are in the region, both afloat and ashore. And more importantly, we have over 100 tankers, which allows our combat aircraft, the F-16s, the F-22s, the Strike Eagle F-15s, the F/A-18s, and the F-35s that have shorter range. Those tankers on your screen can get now fuel to be able to sustain what is called air supremacy over a combat area. Normally, we talk about air superiority, which is a temporal time and space where you have combat air control over a geographic area. But air supremacy is where you can control the air at all times in that whole geographic region for a sustained long period of time. And so it seems to me that we are moving in and preparing our forces for air supremacy. And I would just say to Mr. Haas, who talked about managing, if we do a strike, we'll have to manage some kind of a deal with the Iranians. No, we're not going to manage anything. We're going to come in, and if President Trump decides to use military force, we will destroy Iran's military, 100% of it. We will take down their SRBMs, their medium-range ballistic missiles, and their naval forces and their remaining little air forces that they have and their air defense forces. And we will sit over the top of Iran and call fires down on anybody that tries to shoot off an air defense missile or a ballistic missile. They may get off one or two here and there, but they're not going to be able to sustain any kind of campaign against our allies in the region and against our forces. And
so to be very clear, President Trump, right now, we're seeing all of this military equipment and hardware relocate to the Middle East because President Trump is preparing to deliver a fatal series of airstrikes. Right now, he just said we've got 3 times more aircraft in the region than we did in June during Operation Midnight Hammer. This is the single largest buildup in the Middle East since the Iraq invasion in 2003. Absolutely massive. However, there's something I want to say here, and this is very important. This must be said. As a reminder here, as we're talking about all of this, one thing must be made very clear. President Trump has absolutely precisely zero interest in a massive American boots on the ground operation. Right now, with what we're talking about pertaining to Iran, we are talking about an air superiority campaign exclusively, not a massive troop deployment, boots on the ground, 2003 style war on terror type of dynamic. President Trump is vehemently opposed to that. Over the last 2 months or so, in fact, I want to show you something here. Over the last 2 months or so, that this entire situation with Iran has re-escalated. President Trump and Trump's White House have gone to the media numerous times saying explicitly that boots on the ground are not going to happen. And I've put together this collage with a couple different instances here, 4 different media articles going back about a month and a half. No boots on the ground. We're not interested in boots on the ground. Trump is not interested in boots on the ground. We're not doing boots on the ground. Very clear message. No boots on the ground. So we know that Trump is not interested in this. What's more, according to President Trump's 2025 going into 2026 national security strategy, as well as the Department of War's 2026 National Defense Strategy, all of which is publicly available. You can go Google that and read it if you want. We know for a fact that Trump actually not only has no intention of boots on the ground in the Middle East, Trump wants out of the Middle East. Trump wants to pull the U.S. entirely out of the Middle East. But that in order to make that happen, according to the National Security Strategy and the Department of War's National Defense Strategy, in order to actually withdraw U.S. presence from that region of the world in order to bring our approximately 45,000 troops home. Fun fact, right this moment, spread out across the entire Middle East, we have around 45,000 troops right now in the Middle East. Trump wants them back in order to bring these men and women back and also to hand off operational control of the Middle East to our partners in the region. As part of this pullout, it's been determined that the Iranian regime's capacity to destabilize the region and project power across that region has got to be shut down. So Trump has determined in order to actually pull the U.S. back out, we're done in the Middle East, we're done in the sandbox, we're going to pass off control to our partners and allies. But in order to make that happen, according to the White House and Department of War documentation at least, we've got to effectively shut down Iran. We cannot allow Iran to be launching off ballistic missiles and rockets and funding terror cells across the region and enriching uranium and maintaining the capacity to develop a nuclear bomb. So we've got to shut that down, and then we're out. Then we're passing it off. So just to be very clear, what we are seeing President Trump do right now with this pressure, with this operation that seems to be looming on the horizon with Iran, this is President Trump's exit strategy. Trump is doing all this to get us out. Trump wants nothing to do with the Middle East. We've also seen today, this is coming from former deputy commander of CENTCOM, which is the region in which Iran and Israel, it's the Middle Eastern region, is called CENTCOM. The U.S. now has the capacity to dismantle the Iranian regime's power structure, quote, in a matter of hours. The U.S. can shatter the Iranian regime's power structure in a matter of hours, per the former deputy commander of CENTCOM. And, you know, I would tend to believe that. Now, I want to share with you folks something very interesting that popped up on the timeline late last night. Ladies and gentlemen, this is a gentleman, this is him here. His name is John Kiriakou. He's a CIA whistleblower. Late last night, he said that a White House source told him that President Trump has decided to engage Iran on Monday or Tuesday. Now, this individual here, John Kiriakou, has an interesting background. Some of you might be familiar with him. John Kiriakou here, I'm going to put this up on the big screen. That's him. He's a former CIA officer who became actually the first CIA whistleblower to confirm the CIA's use of waterboarding as a means of interrogation. So he's an old school CIA whistleblower, former CIA officer. He was actually prosecuted during the Obama administration for leaking classified information. He pled guilty in 2012 to leaking classified information. Then he spent 23 months in a federal prison. So the reason I give you this guy's background is because, I don't know, maybe he does know what's about to happen. Maybe his information is legitimate. He's been prosecuted as a whistleblower. He went to federal prison for leaking classified information. Now, the reason I'm sharing this with you is because this is going viral right now. He says Trump is going to attack Iran on Monday or Tuesday. We'll take a look at the video here.
I have a friend, former CIA officer, who was at the White House this morning talking to his friends, and he says that a decision has been made to attack Iran on Monday or Tuesday. The president yesterday gave the Iranians 10 days to accept our proposals for an end to their ballistic missile program, an end to their uranium enrichment program, an end to supporting groups in the Middle East like Hamas and Hezbollah and the Houthis. But he's done this before. Well, he'll give you 10 days, he'll give you 2 weeks, and then he'll just attack 2 days into it.
And by the way, with Operation Midnight Hammer, that right there is actually literally what happened. Trump said that he's going to give the Iranian regime he said he was going to give him 2 weeks to come to the table and work out a deal. 2 days after saying that, the B-2 Spirit stealth bombers were dropping 50,000-pound bunker buster bombs on all of the Iranian regime's nuclear enrichment facilities. That's what happened over the summer.
He thinks that keeps people off balance. And so he said that there are battle lines, that the anti-war forces are J.D. Vance and Tulsi Gabbard.
Oh,
He said that
That's it?
That's it. He said the pro-war people are led by Marco Rubio and include Pete Hegseth and now the Joint Chiefs of Staff.
so once again, ladies and gentlemen, this is all part of the puzzle here. We're trying to make sense. Take this with a grain of salt. Take this with a grain of salt. We're just trying to get dots on the plot. We got to get the dots on the plot to figure out what's going on. This guy's source might be bogus. He might be bogus himself. I gave you his history. I just want to get that out there. He could be wrong. He could be right. What he says, according to his source, is that J.D. Vance and DNI Tulsi Gabbard, they do not want to intervene in Iran, but that Marco Rubio, well, literally everybody else does. So there's perhaps, allegedly, a little bit of a struggle inside of the Trump administration right now. Forces pushing back and forth.
And I stopped him on that point this morning and I said, wait a minute. I said, during the Iraq War, at the start of the Iraq War, the most stridently anti-war component was the Joint Chiefs of Staff. They were always the last ones that wanted to attack because they know what war is. And he said, but you forget, Trump has replaced all of the Joint Chiefs this year, in the past 12 months, which I had forgotten. Any of these four-star generals who, had worked their way up through the ranks, but had served under Biden, he fired all of them. All of them. And he promoted people that he knew would be politically loyal.
Do you think this is to distract from the current scandal?
Probably in part, yeah.
How about them saying they're going to release the UFO files last night, which I've wanted released forever, but
This is also one of these current conspiracies. I haven't really talked about this too much because, frankly, I kind of don't care. But 2 days ago, Trump said that they were going to release all the information about aliens and UFOs, and he directed the Department of War, Hegseth, to release everything about aliens. I kind of personally don't care about aliens, but one of the ideas right now, generally coming from the left, is that, well, of course, Trump is only releasing these alien files because he's about to bomb Iran, and he wants to divert everybody's attention away from Iran, where he's going to be dropping bombs here any day now. He wants to have everybody talking about aliens as a diversion. I don't really think that's the case, and frankly, I don't also personally kind of don't care about aliens. But anyway, that's what this individual is talking about. So allegedly, according to this former CIA officer and whistleblower, Trump is going to be dropping bombs here. He's going to give the order. We're dropping bombs in Iran on Monday or Tuesday of next week. Now, think about the timeline here, though. The State of the Union national address is on Tuesday night. That's February 24th. It is difficult for me to imagine that Trump is going to give the go-ahead order one day before or maybe the day of the State of the Union. If anything, I would imagine he would wait till after the State of the Union. But time will tell. Listen, who knows? Who knows? Here's a curious question, though. What is the Iranian regime's response to all of this speculation, all this rhetoric? Why don't we break this down? Well, first, plot on the point here. Iran believes U.S. strikes are imminent despite ongoing nuclear talks, according to 6 senior officials and 3 IRGC members. All armed forces in Iran right now are on maximum alert and prepping for a forceful response. This is coming out of the New York Times. We saw also similarly, Iran earlier this morning is deploying ballistic missile launchers along its western border with Iraq and its southern coast on the Persian Gulf, placing U.S. bases within striking distance of these Iranian ballistic missile launchers. So Iran is pre-positioning. Seems like they think something is coming. We have another report here coming out of the New York Times. The supreme leader of Iran, Ayatollah Khamenei, has taken measures this morning to ensure the regime's survival via naming 4 layers of succession for each of the military command and government roles that he appoints, getting each senior official to name not 1, not 2, not 3, 4 replacements for their role should they get blown up, should they die. So I did a quick search into this. How many Iranian senior officials are there? How many people are we talking about? Well, the best approximation here is that there are around 30 or so senior officials within the Iranian government. So that puts this entire layered leadership structure, including all of the potential replacements, 4 replacements per 1 member. There's 30 members of senior leadership, right around, what is that? Around 150 people in total that the U.S. would need to take out, for lack of a better word, if it is our objective to carry out a decapitation strike against the entire Iranian leadership structure. You've got 30 primary senior officials and then 4 backups per 150 people is what we would have to take out, I guess, if we want to totally shut down the Iranian leadership structure. Seems to be the case. Moving on, we also have this. Iranian officials say ballistic missile launchers have been positioned along Iran's western border and southern coast, officially placing U.S. bases and regional targets within range. So we'll read this final report here. Well, before we read that, let me just give my thoughts. What seems to be the case to me is that Iran is actually not even attempting at this point to stop the U.S. from bombing them. If Iran really did not want the U.S. to bomb them, they would agree to shut down their ballistic missile program, and to stop enriching uranium, because those are the 2 demands that the Trump administration has made. They're not doing that. And so it seems to me that the Iranian regime, they're not, at this point, they're just sort of preparing to get hit. They're kind of preparing to get hit. They're posturing up. They're building their leadership redundancy structure, 4 replacements per members of the senior leadership team. They're sort of pre-deploying their ballistic missile launchers. They are getting ready to weather a blow to get hit here. And then also, what happens after they get hit? They want to fire back. They're getting ready to take that hit, and then they want to fire back after that hit has already been delivered. Seems like that's where the Iranians stand right now. Now, a lot of people have been talking about, okay, if Trump bombs Iran here coming up, what is China going to say? What is Russia going to say about all of this? Well, we have a report as of this morning. Beijing and Moscow have tightened coordination with Tehran, Iran, yet neither shows appetite for direct military backing of Iran if Washington decides to carry out the strikes. China's priority is uninterrupted oil flows. Keep in mind, China benefits from this Iranian shadow fleet. China gets a lot of their energy, if I remember properly, in the ballpark of 15%, maybe 20% of Chinese energy comes from Iran through the Iranian shadow fleet. So this would be a big problem for China. Russia is wary of jeopardizing ties with President Trump. We know that Russia right now is trying to rebuild a relationship with Trump right now and the United States. We've seen that very publicly. Both China and Russia are signaling that they will not gamble on a war with Washington over Iran. So, seems to be the case at the moment is that China and Russia are not really particularly happy about this situation with Iran. They would prefer that the U.S. does not bomb Iran, but at the same time, they're not willing to do anything about it. They're not going to stop us. They're not going to get involved. At least that's what the early reports are suggesting. So, time will tell. Like we said right now, it's like, how much can we trust Washington, the Wall Street Journal? How much can we trust this news source or that news source or this leaker we were talking about? There's a reason why we have a term for this. It's called the fog of war. It's because you can kind of speculate, you can put together best guesses, but we don't know for a fact. So that's why we're going through all of this. We're getting points on the plot. Ladies and gentlemen, that is where things currently stand. Now, if I had to give you my opinion, we have all the information out. If I had to give you my personal opinion, I think that we will see a series of strikes carried out against the Iranian regime probably in the second half of this upcoming week. We said that on February 24th, President Trump is giving the State of the Union national address. I would suppose that after the State of the Union national address, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, could be that we will see these strikes get carried out. And I would imagine that these strikes against the Iranian regime will also make Operation Midnight Hammer, which we saw last summer, look like child's play. Now, sort of as a conclusion here, keep in mind, Trump is a very nimble navigator. We've known as much for over a decade now. I mean, really for his entire life. As we've all seen time and time again, he is a very calculated, premeditated individual. He always walks into the room, not just with a plan A, but a plan B and a plan C and a plan D all the way to Z. And then even further, perhaps. We also know for a fact, as we talked about earlier, Trump is not looking for a massive war on terror type of scenario. We know that. We absolutely know that. Trump wants out of the Middle East. Trump wants the United States to kind of dust our hands off of the Middle East and pass off control. He wants to bring our 45,000 soldiers that have been there forever back home. He's saying waste of money, waste of resources, waste of U.S. tax dollars. We spend about $5 billion a year effectively governing the Middle East. Trump wants to pass that off. Not our responsibility. He's said that. The Trump White House has said that very publicly numerous times. It's in all of our national security documents. Trump is done with the Middle East. But that in order to make that happen, the Iranian regime and their capacity to destabilize the region and protect and project power and potentially develop nuclear weapons, that has got to be shut down. Trump has determined if we want to pull out of the Middle East, we effectively have to shut down the Iranian regime. And so that is kind of why all of this is happening. So, ladies and gentlemen, that is where we are. That is what to expect. That's my personal best assessment of where things currently stand. Really, though, only time will tell.